Yes. This is Nike, and this is Nike's roadmap to success. Why don't you come over here and show everybody how handsome you are. Sit. Yes. Yes is the marker word we came up with in the session. So I was called in for a resource guarding problem for him, and he's a big dog. He is, what did you say he was? Mastiff Lab Mix or Roddy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mastiff Lab Pro.
There you go. And Mastiffs are kind of a guarding breed to begin with, not related to resource guarding. The video above talks about that. But basically, he's a good dog, but he doesn't know very good manners. He invades people's personal space. He nudges and jumps up for attention. And a lot of us don't ever think about teaching your dog manners, but it's really important to do. So next time he's nudging you, if he's nudging you, I would like you to tell him to sit or down. Yes. I think he was going to lay down there anyways. And then so if he nudges and tells me what to do, and I do it, then after a while it confuses him into thinking that he's in charge of me, because when he directs me, I listen. So just like parents do, if he nudges you, it's kind of like a little kid saying, I don't want meatloaf, go make me some chicken nuggets. Mom usually would say, would you like to ask for that again? Can you please make me chicken nuggets? And if you can, you go and make those items, because we want the kid to know that being polite has a benefit or a reward. I think his motivation, he was a little bit confused about what's going on. I think his motivation was a little bit lacking. And these are all common things that a lot of people do with their dogs. There's nobody's setting off like, I'm going to screw up my dog, but there's a lot of things that we do as humans, the way we look at things that are confusing for dogs. So let me kind of go through this in more linear fashion. So the first thing we talked about was marker words. A marker word is the word we use the instant the dog does the thing that we want, or at the conclusion of it if it has duration, like teaching your dog to stay or asking it to potty. We would say yes at the end of potty. Now, there's a difference between saying yes and yes. That excitement will often cause dogs to stop. So just say, I usually recommend just be conversational. That's the easiest way to do it, because that's what we're normally going to do. Now, to do this, I had the guardians walk around both with a clicker as well as just verbally. So the clicker and yes mean the exact same thing. The difference is a clicker will cut through a lot of extra stimulus, where yes is harder to say here because we say it so frequently. So I had the guardians load it. So he just walked around and said, yes, treat. Yes, he didn't say treat. And you take a couple steps and do that. I'd like you guys to do that 1 or 2 more times. Now, you're going to see this about a week later. So for you guys, if you're listening real quick, make sure you do that loading exercise. Walk around the house. I'd like you to click or say the word in every room in the house, and I'd like each one of you to do this twice. And it would be nice to actually have your kids work on this as well, because it helps him practice listening to the kids and be rewarded for doing so. And all you have to do is say yes and give him the treat. He doesn't have to sit, look at you, lay down, or do anything, and he doesn't know what's coming. Well, at this point, he probably knows it's coming. So now when we say the marker word the instant the dog does it or at the conclusion of it, and it's followed within 2 seconds by a reinforcer, which could be petting or giving a treat. So that's called priming or loading the marker. It only has to happen maybe 4 or 5 different practice sessions, about 12 or 15 treats. And after that point, you shouldn't have to do it. Then when the dog does something you want, it sits, you say yes and give it a treat. Or pet it or whatever you want. But preferably we want to get a treat at least at first. So we also went over hand targeting. I have a video on that one. I would like you guys to practice that. That one leads us to dog consent. Sometimes dogs get in a resource guarding because we're not reading their signals. So if you're ever uncertain if he's guarding or not, or you don't know whether or not he wants you to engage with him, ask him to come to you, say, touch. Once, yes. And if he does come to you, then you pet him or engage with him. If he doesn't come to you, you don't ask him to do it 12 times because he knows how to do it. He's saying, I don't feel comfortable walking towards you. I don't feel comfortable in that part of the house or whatever it is. So now if we're asking him to come to us, now we have an indicator whether he feels comfortable with it or not. If he has a bone or something, we approach him. Sometimes that makes them feel cornered. There was a biting incident, I believe, right here. This is a confined area. There's no escape over here. This is really, dogs have what's called a fight or flight response. If I'm cornered and I have nowhere else to go, I have no choice but to fight. So we don't want that. So we always want to get our dogs consent. It makes them feel comfortable and relaxed. I'd also like the guardians to practice a drop exercise. So when he has an antler or any of the bones he's allowed to have without the other dogs being present or any guest or anybody, just hold the treat up to his mouth. Don't say anything. And as soon as he drops it, say release, or say yes, and then put the treat in his mouth and don't pick the item up, kind of like what I talked about above video. And then let him go back to doing it. So what we're doing is just helping him practice dropping with low value items that we don't particularly care for so that he doesn't have a reason to want to guard them. Then after a while, now we can introduce a cue. A cue is the command word. We only say it when we're 90% certain the dog's going to do what we want. So if I've done the drop like 5 or 6 times in a row, now I start walking towards him. He's just dropping it. Now I'm ready to do the cue. I'd say release, and he drops it. And I say yes and give him that treat. Eventually, there will be a time where you'll say, you'll lure the dog into a sit, and then say yes, and then give the dog a treat. And eventually you get to the point where you just say, we have a marker word and a cue at the same time is what I'm trying to say. So you'd say, at first we just lure him, yes, lure him into a sit, yes, lure him into a sit, yes, lure him into a sit, yes. Then we just say sit and then lure him, because he just did it 5 times, we're pretty certain he's going to do it. But we sneak the word in first, and only one word. Come, here, come here, over here, dog's name, dog's nickname, whistle, tap my thigh, good boy. We come up with 10 different ways of calling our dog. If you speak English, I mean the same thing. To dogs, they are completely separate vocabulary. If you remember when you're taking Spanish or German when you were in high school, what is the most difficult part is when somebody uses vocabulary you don't know. We drown in the vocabulary. The smartest dog in the world knows about 2,000 words. We usually assign about 5 to 10 command cues for every action. So if the dog knows 10 things and there's 10 cues, that's 100 words. That's 10% of the dog's total vocabulary probably going to be able to teach them that we wasted by just making it harder than it needs to. So I'd like the Guardians to come up with a list of the official cues. And if I say, come here, and somebody says, oh, vocabulary, then I would say, come. So we're gonna just consolidate to one word. Dogs that have resource guarding, or well, not necessarily resource guarding, but a lot of dogs that are reactive are doing so out of a frustration. All dog aggression comes from stress. So we want to do everything we can to remove any frustration or anxiety, because those things both lead to stress. When we remove those 2 things, the dog feels comfortable and confident, and we simultaneously practice dropping things, then it's easier. And remember, if the dog has paper or something, and I'd like you guys to practice that. Most of us try to train our dogs at a time that we would never accept for ourselves. We try to train in the moment, which is the worst way to learn. So when the door is closed and the other dogs are away, I would exercise him first. You could do the leave it cue that I just practiced with you guys with balled up pieces of paper. So at first we do it with the treat. We know he likes the treat, but he also likes paper. So let's practice and condition him. When you see me drop paper on the ground, that means I should disengage and look up at the human, because that means I'm going to get a treat for leaving it alone. I have motivation to leave it alone. Well, right now, if I grab the paper, you're going to chase me all over the place. That's motivation to grab it. And then I get to eat it. It makes you really upset. I love that. Well, let's make it the other way around. Dropping stuff is what I love, because that's what gets me the treat. If you need a video on the hand targeting, the leave it exercise, cookie in the corner, any of these things, message me. I've got them here. If I don't have them linked up here, I can link them up on the page for you as well. Let me see. So then we went over, after hand targeting, remember to say touch every time you're doing it. So eventually you can say touch and the dog runs over to you. I'd like you to practice that amongst yourselves, and eventually have the kids come over, practice with them, and then you can use that anytime you think he's resource guarding, call him over to you. If the dogs are playing, I would teach all the dogs how to do this. Teach them separately, but then the dogs are playing too rough, you say touch, and they run over and touch their nose to your hand, and then you pull out 2 treats, have one sit here, so you're not even fighting over the treats. We call this pair treating. Take a couple steps back, another treat. Have them practice getting a treat next to the other dog. So later on, when there's a treat on the floor or whatever, they don't feel like they have to confront each other, because you helped them practice it and you've taught them manners. All right, so I went over petting with a purpose, which is essentially the manners. So if you want to pet your dog, or your dog is nudging you or pawing at you, you tell the dog to sit 1 time. If the dog sits, then you say yes, and you pet it here, 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 or here, and pet as much or as little as you want. If I say sit and Nike doesn't sit, and I say it 100 times, he's practicing not listening to me. He's practicing ignoring that word, and that's going to make that word less valuable. So don't repeat it. Say it once. So if I say sit and Nike doesn't sit, I'm going to lean back in the couch, watch some TV, check some emails on my phone, play guitar, play video games, talk to the kids, do whatever else. I'm disengaging. I'm not punishing the dog, but the dog's not getting what it wants. This is actually a pre-Mac. But basically, eventually, the dog will recognize this. If I want something in a human, you always make me sit or lay down. Don't ask for a shake. What will happen is he'll come start sitting in front of you to prepay for that sit, for that attention. When he does, you better bet your butt, you're petting him. Otherwise, he can go back to pawing and nudging at you. After a while, like I said, it'll start sitting to prepay for the attention. What we're doing is we're teaching the dog manners. So that's usually the watchword we use. So if somebody comes in the room and sees that I'm petting him and he's standing up, somebody says manners to me, I would stop petting, say sit. If he sits, I would pet him under his chin and say yes, and then tell the person, actually I asked him to sit and you missed it. But thanks, I do forget to pet without a purpose. And if he doesn't sit, disengaging with him, playing hard to get works great for dating, and works great for dog training too. Eventually, like I said, he'll sit to prepay for it. Use the watchword of manners so that you're helping each other get into a habit of doing it, because you won't realize how often you come over, he nudges you and you're petting him because you're watching TV or on your computer. You don't even think about it. You formed a bad habit or behavior pattern. It's going to take you 66 days of doing it the other way. So keep using the watchword of manners to get in that habit. And if you want to pet him, you tell him to sit. If he doesn't sit, then you just go back to doing what you're doing. Now, after 3 months of doing this, then you can pet him kind of whenever you're doing it. But right now, I think you're accidentally reinforcing a lot of behaviors that are contributed to his accosting guest, his lack of impulse control, which is related a little bit to his resource guarding. So let me see, what else? We also went over celebrating. Celebrating is waiting for the dog to voluntarily offer you the behavior that you want without asking for it. Same way if a kid shares a game with another child, you would say, that's a good job of sharing. If you tell a kid to share it while he's playing the game, he's not going to want to because he's losing something. Same thing for dogs. So anytime he does anything you want, you're just going to say your marker word the instant he does it, and then you're going to provide him reinforcement. So I'd like you to make a list of the things that the desirable behaviors for your dog. Sitting, laying down, coming to you are pretty obvious. Eye contact is overlooked. Hand targeting. Hand targeting, I guess, is different. That's more of an engagement. Going to that spot. Drinking your water, sitting at the door. So you're sitting here watching TV and you see him out of the corner of your eye. He sits at the door right there. Yes, get up and walk over and open the door for him. So I sit at the door, you listen to me. Sitting is a great way to get your attention. So sitting is something I'm going to do as a dog because it works for me. Dogs do whatever works. So after a while, he'll start sitting at the door to ask to go out, and then you go, yes, and you go open the door and let him out there. Let me see. We also talked about well, for celebrating, that's the watchword we use. So somebody says celebrate, make sure you stop what you're doing, say yes, and pet the dog, even if you didn't recognize it. But the idea is to be mindful of it. And let's say that he's over there where he is now, and I saw he got up and he was walking towards me. I know he's coming here. I would say the word, hey, he's already walking, come. He gets to me, I say yes, and then I pet him. He was already coming to me. I'm just kind of sneaking that word in while he's a ways away, and that's going to make him more likely to come consistently when you call him because there's something in it for him. I think I might get a chance to do one right here. Maybe not. No, he's sniffing, looking for treats. We also talked about exercise. So he doesn't go for walks because he's so big. Yes, that's celebrating right there. He came to me. I didn't ask him to do it. I didn't show him any reason to do it. But when he did it, he got rewarded. So it makes him more likely to do that in the future. Yes. Yes. That was a little bit early on the yes. Now, let me see, what else? The guardian does not walk him very much because he has some reactivity issues, and the guardian's a little bit concerned. He's a big dog. He weighs over 120 pounds. So what I'd like you to do is practice walking him in the backyard. Have some treats with you. Have him on a leash walking, and every time he looks up at you, yes, and hold the treat out. What is he doing? He's turning around coming back to you. When you're walking him in the yard, as soon as he pulls out to the end of the leash, as soon as he gets to the end of the leash, say, well, I'll try to do it right here. Watch his head. That's called a positive interrupter. You can also say beep, 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 beep. You say 3 or 4 times. The reason I don't like using the beep, beep, beep too many times, you saw he got excited right there. Excited is not the same thing as happy. It's harder for dogs to listen when they're overstimulated. So if I make that kissing sound, he looks at me, then I can use the hand target or do something to get his attention. That's what we prefer to do if he has paper or something like that. You get his attention and show him the hand target, or we're going to play this game or that game, and he comes over and wants to do that particular item. Teaching him leash manners in your backyard. If he does pulls the leash out of your hand, he's in a secured backyard anyways. So what you do is just walk him around your yard, and every time he gets the leash, just say, looks at you, you hold the treat out. Don't give him the treat, hold the treat. He practices coming back to you. If you do this enough, eventually you'll create a classically conditioned response. As a dog, when I'm Nike and I get to the end of my leash, I'm just going to turn around and come back to the human, because every time that happens, I get a treat, and you'll start doing that without having you kiss. We do the kiss. Yes, in the short term to help build that behavior, but eventually, because it happens at the same time that he hits the end of the leash, he hears that kiss, eventually he'll hear the end of the leash, it'll be a classically conditioned response. He'll be on a leash and turn around and look at you, and you're holding out a treat, and he practices coming back to you. After you get to the point where you practice a lot in your yard, and he's just kind of walking next to you, and he's checking in with you often, I reward eye contact as well. So anytime you're on the leash, and he looks at you on his own, hold it, say yes, and hold the treat out. Again, he practices coming back to you. These are some of the fundamentals of loose leash walking. The Guardian has used a prong collar and a shock collar in the past. I explained that those are really bad to use because whatever a dog is looking at when the pain is applied is where they perceive it came from. So if I'm pulling down a leash and I see another dog that I want to get to and I pull and my Guardian pulls against me to prevent me getting there, it chokes bites my neck. I think whatever I'm looking at is where the bite came from. Same thing with shock collars. This is why you have the illusion of a short-term progress, but really you're creating a ticking time bomb. One day I'll get to that person because they shock me 50 times. Every time I bark at the neighbor, I get a shock. Well, then one day I'm not wearing a shock collar and I'm loose. I'm going to bite that neighbor because he's antagonized me. So that's why we don't use aversive training tools or methods in modern dog training, because that's related to having to force and overpower the dog, which you can do with the Chihuahua. You shouldn't. You can't do it with a 125-pound Mastiff mix. I want the dog to be doing the control. All right, so for exercise, sniffing on walks burn more energy than an actual walk. So sniffing, hiding treats in your backyard and letting him sniff and find them is a wonderful way to drain energy. Probably do that part with their treats or stuff with the dogs separately. Do it with the other dogs. Scent games is a great thing to, and I'll talk about mental stimulation in a sec, but mental stimulation is a wonderful way to burn energy, especially for older dogs, because it doesn't require the physical capabilities. So going for a walk and sniffing a sniff walk is a great way to burn energy, even if you're doing it in your backyard. And eventually work up to the point where you walk in your backyard and then maybe open the fence and walk around your house and walk to the other fence and walk back in the backyard. You're just walking around your house. You're helping the dog practice listening to you without getting too far away. Every once in a while, stop and ask the dog to sit. If he sits, say yes and give him a treat. If he won't sit, he's indicating I'm getting too aroused. Don't continue down the path of wherever you're going if he's too aroused to listen to you. As soon as he indicates that he can't sit and you know he knows how to sit, you shouldn't go any further because you're already reached his level. That looks a little bit shifty, buddy. All right, so let me see, what else? Playing tug of war is something we usually recommend, but for him, he kind of gets into a guarding mode sometimes with tug of war, so this isn't appropriate for the Guardians. Right now, he gets most of his exercise playing with the other two dogs. One of the dogs is elderly, we just don't really like dogs. It's very easy for them to learn to play more rough. It's almost impossible to teach them to play gently. So make sure that you're playing, you're not letting him practice playing inappropriately. Try to interrupt that. So when they start playing, maybe have two of them playing together and have both of you have practiced the cookie in the corner or other exercise, and the energy starts getting level 2, level 3, level 4. Hey, Nike! And he comes over to you, and the other dog comes the other direction. And now you separate them. You ask him to sit, give him a treat. So lay down, say yes, give him a treat. Hand target, yes, give him a treat. Practice a couple of things. Instead of the dog thinking, I want to get back there, I'm really dialed into the human. Listening human is a good thing. It gets me all those rewards. My energy level's coming back down. When I get back to about level 1, 2, 3 energy, then my Guardians let me go back to play. And if you consistently give this interruption at 50% of their energy range, after a while, they will start moderating and keeping themselves there. If they go beyond that, that's when fights and stuff happen. Hasn't been a fight between the dogs together, but I've had at least a couple hundred clients who told me that was the case, and then one day it actually hit a tipping point. We don't want that to be the case. Exercising through playing fetch is another great way to exercise dogs physically. Something else you might want to consider, you want to check with your vet about this, is getting a doggy backpack. It's a harness that has pockets here. You can put bottles of water or bags of sand or something like that. It makes the walking more efficient because the dog's carrying more weight. Check with your vet. Not every dog, it's not appropriate for every dog. Some dogs have hip and joint issues that they don't want them doing with. He is also a little bit, you want to be able to feel the ribs and not see them. I cannot feel them. He's carrying a little bit more weight as I am. And so I would grab about 7 or 8 fresh green beans and chop them up into little bits and substitute some of his food. Take about 10% of his food in, put those 7 or 8 green beans in there. The fiber will help him feel full. If we also simultaneously increase his exercise, just like I'm in the process of doing, we have a calorie deficit and we start losing weight. Now, right now he's only fed once a day, and that's not good. Dogs should be fed minimum of twice a day, preferably more than that, but at least twice a day. Otherwise, they have low blood sugar, they eat too much, and they're irritable at times because they're hungry for a lot of the day. So I'd like to have you guys feed him in breakfast and around dinner, around 5 or whatever. They're probably not going to eat a lot for breakfast at first. So you might want to take some of those tricky trainers that I have, cut them into quarters, and sprinkle some of those in there. Now, if we feed out of a snuffle mat, that's a great way to kind of fold in some exercise without us having to get the exercise ourselves. And so, just thought of something else I want to go over. So basically, if we feed them out of snuffle mat or snuffle mats in different locations, the dogs are all having energy burned just by doing something we're going to do twice a day anyway. So it's a nice, easy way to sneak in some exercise. Training a dog, 2-minute practice sessions, a great way to drain energy. We were going over the leave it exercise. He is breathing really heavy. He's pretty chill right now. Remember, we can use exercise or mental stimulation to set him up for success. Just remember, after something really heavy taxing, he needs at least 10 minutes to recover before the next thing happens. Let me see. Other forms of mental stimulation would be giving him treat dispensing toys or puzzles, things that like have treats in it you have to work to get out. And having him have, all the dogs have time apart where they maybe get a bully stick or ingestible chew item like a cow kneecap or ear or something like that. It's also helpful. Chewing is a good way for dogs to alleviate some stress. Let me see. We also went over cookie in the corner. Actually, one of the things that I forgot that is really, really important in this case is lick mats. Dogs, when they're chewing or licking, it releases endorphins. So there are a couple children in the family who are a little bit fearful of him because he's a big dog and he's growled and he's kind of mouthed their hands a couple times. And so a lick mat is something that we smear peanut butter on, and it usually has suction cups in the back, so we can put one over here and he's over here maybe on leash with dad's holding leash, and then the kids are nearby. So we want to have him have this lick mat when the kids are present or when guests are present. So that way I'm getting these endorphins released in the proximity of the children or the guests. That makes me feel more comfortable and amicable around them. Let's build in some positive associations together. Let me see. Real quick, I'm going to go over body language when I talk about greetings. So you see right here, if you can see him, see how his mouth closed there? Now that's not a bad close in that particular capacity, but if a dog goes from an open mouth like this to a closed mouth, that's a big warning. Dogs are normally also what I like to call wiggly and jiggly. If you see go from wiggly and jiggly and the mouth closes and I get still and stiff and hold my breath or breath starts coming heavy, that's a big warning. Most of us don't recognize that. We think the warning is the dog's barking or lunging or biting us. That's waiting way too long. So you also want to learn to read your dog's ears. He has kind of traditional flab ears. So if he's normal, they're going to be like this. If he's feeling a little bit anxious, you're going to see him peeled back, or really fearful might be back. If he wants to be more humble, you'll see the inside of the ear facing the cheek. So this is the outside flap. It'll kind of turn, and so your outside flaps will be here. So recognizing the difference between those, seeing, okay, when he's casual and relaxed, his ears like this. When he's uncomfortable, it goes into resource guarding mode, it goes like this. So if we can recognize, does he have his nose up or down? Or is he have whale eye, which is a lot of white in the eye? Is he staring at me? Are his pupils dilated? Or is he refusing to look at me or engage with me? Those are warnings. Is the tail going straight up and stiff? That's also a warning. Are the hackles going up? That can be also an indication warning. Hair standing up on between the shoulder blades or between the hips. Breathing heavy or holding their breath. I look for kind of combinations of these things. So the Guardians have actually identified several of his tells, but the more of those that we can recognize, the better at we're going to be. And so we're doing the exercise in the video above. I'd like you to watch for those tells when you're walking towards him and he's chewing a stick. All of a sudden he gets still and stiff and closes his mouth. That's his tell. Okay, so I stop where I'm at. I take note of that distance, just like I talked about in the video above, and then we back up a couple steps, let him relax, then come back and practice at a distance greater to help him practice when he's feeling calm and relaxed. Let me see. I'd like the Guardians to practice having him sit on the carpet right at the edge of the stairs. What I'd like you to do for that is go there, tell him Bahamas, and lure him there. As soon as his butt hits around, say yes and give him that treat. Then take one step back. Don't pause at the end of your step. Take a step back and immediately come back to him, say yes and give him the treat. Do that about 5 or 6 times as a warm-up, and then try going 2 steps back for your 7th repetition on that practice round. And if he stays there, then walk back to him, say yes and give him that treat, and do that 6 or 7 times. Then try to go to 3 steps. Don't try to do it all at once. The idea is to always, always, always end on a positive repetition, because that's the memory that they're going to recall the best and brightest. So if you push too far and the dog gets frustrated, he's not going to want to practice, and because he's going to remember you got frustrated. And the last thing that he remembers about it is you being upset because we pushed too long. Shorter, more frequent practice sessions are far more productive. And I would teach all the dogs these exercises. That way, all of them have the same cues, and it's easier for you to redirect them. So basically put them on the carpet, take one step back, work all the way to the point where you walk to the door. When you turn your shoulders away from him, that's going to be hard. So at first, when you turn your shoulders, immediately turn and come back to him right away. And if you can't go all the way, then maybe I walk backwards, I get to the door, I just turn my hips like this, or my shoulders like this, and then say yes and come back to him. Next time I maybe do it this more, and then eventually here, and eventually here. So the idea is to gradually break it down to small steps. So now you're facing away from him, and you reach your hand for the deadbolt. Don't touch it, just reach your hand, pull it back, walk all the way back to him, say yes, breaking it down into small steps. Eventually, after reaching for it a couple times, then you jiggle the deadbolt, latch it open, then walk over, yes, and then walk back to it, latch it closed. Keep on that step several times until the sound triggers are really hard. The deadbolt, the handle, and the screen door handle are probably and the door opening are probably the hardest triggers in this. So again, very methodical practice, little by little by little, without anybody outside and nobody at the door. Don't start practicing with somebody at the door until you can say Bahamas, he goes and sits there, and you can walk all the way to the door, unlatch it, open the door and open it all the way, and he stays sitting. Only then are we ready to do it where we have maybe somebody else outside the door. And again, we can exercise him first to set him up for success. And remember, don't just have random guests come over. Have friends or people come over that are specifically there to help you practice. Hey, Tony, I haven't talked to you in a long time, man. We got this new dog, Nike. Yeah, I know you like Nike. Hey, anyways, he's got some impulse control issues. We had a dog behaviors come by, and he said we need to practice. I said we need to get good dog people. Thought of you. Why don't you come over and help us practice a little bit, and we'll get a six-pack, which we'll sit out on the deck afterwards and drink a little beer. So now they come over and they're there with you with the intent of helping you. You're not thinking about hosting a party or what are the kids doing or when is the food ready or do we need more napkins? You're just working about that thing. And you brought a guest that's specifically selected to help you with that. Now you need a lot of variety. Get different guests, but just really work on those. And you might have to guests come multiple times before they're comfortable doing this. Now for meeting guests, what I would do before you even meet guests, I would grab some tricky trainers or probably some Charlie Bears and set up a treat trail right from your front door, going down about, at first the treats are about 12 inches apart, then maybe 24 inches apart, and you lead them down your sidewalk, down to your driveway, and then along the side of your car's parked. And then right before the dog's gonna be able to see what's around the corner of the car, you have a small pile right there. So it licks those up and then comes around the corner and it's got a whole bunch of treats in it. And you practice this a couple times without anybody there. But then you have one of your friends that is in on it with you that we just talked about that's gonna help you practice. And they're sitting on the ground with their back to the house, really maybe kind of so that you want to have the person approach kind of from this angle, not behind them and not from the side. You and the dog are approaching it about a diagonal, like from the about 4 o'clock, 4:30 angle on the 12 dial. And they approach the person. And again, I've already practiced getting these treat trail, but there's never been anybody there. And now there's somebody there. When they get to the person should just toss a treat. And toss a treat. And if the dog gets stiff or is barking, have them toss the treat behind the dog. When the dog's barking, all it's saying is, I want more distance. Well, we can throw a treat behind the dog, and the dog goes and gets it. We achieve the same thing. They just don't kind of figure that out on their own. And then they throw a treat here. And after a while, when the dog seems nice and tense, and you can read your dog's body language, you say, okay, why don't you ask the dog, tell him to sit. And so the guest says sit. If the dog sits, we say yes and throw the treat. Or just throw it at his feet. He doesn't have to catch it. But he sat, he listened to the human, and good things happen. So you do that a couple times, add a little bit of a distance until the dog's like, man, this person's pretty awesome. I got all these great treats, and they ask me to sit, and they throw me treats. Then we let them come over. Dogs should explore with their mouth. For dogs using their mouth, they kind of dogs using their mouth or their nose is kind of similar to us. That's like their version of reading. So if they want to come and sniff the person, that's great. As long as their body language is nice and relaxed, you feel comfortable, that's wonderful. The person should hold still. They should not try to pet the dog. Oh, what a good boy. No, just be passive and just sit there and wait. That's why you select someone who's going to help you. After the dog's gotten some sniffs, they can very slowly pull out their hand, hold a treat out. The dog gets the treat. Give a couple of those, and then eventually I'd like to say sit. Make sure they're not directly staring at them. A lot of dogs are eye contact dominant, so have them see out the corner of their eye. And just hold up a treat, sit, yes, and let them lick the treat off your hand. And then when you get to the point where after doing that 5 or 10 times, the dog feels pretty relaxed, seems pretty comfortable with the person, then have the person throw a treat about 15 feet away. When the dog walks away to get it, have the person rock up so they're on their feet, but still really crouched down so their butt's only an inch off the ground. Then the dog approaches, and we do the same thing. They get a treat from the hand, then we ask the dog to sit. If it sits, yes, and give it a treat. Do that 2 or 3 times, and then we throw a treat about 10 feet away, dog walks away. Now we get kind of crouched down. So we're standing, but in a crouched position, made halfway up to standing. And the dog approaches, we do the same thing, and eventually we throw another treat, and then we stand up, the dog walks up, now we're fully standing. The taller we are, the more authority we have. So now the dog approaches, we're standing up, they get a treat from the guest, When the guest asks for a sit, the dog sits, yes, and give it a treat. Make sure you explain to your guest the marker words. You say yes when the dog sits or lays down or whatever it is. And eventually, then you start taking a little walk. Walk maybe 3 or 4 houses. Let the dog sniff as much as it wants to do. The guest is giving treats, and eventually the guest starts asking the dog to sit. Dog sits, yes, treat. Take a couple more steps, sit, yes, treat. What is the dog doing? It's practicing listening to your guest, practicing being rewarded for listening to your guest. We're doing it outside where there's an infinite number of escape routes and a lot of distractions. We've exercised the dog first, so we set them up for success. They've already practiced this treat trail, so it's already, I'm confident because I've already done this multiple times. Now we're just adding a little twist. Like I said, we're adding a little extra stage to the situation. We also went over the importance of rules, not letting the dog in the kitchen when we're preparing food. Right now the dogs kind of congregate around the table. It's inappropriate. They should be at least 7 or 8 feet away. Even though they're not actively begging, it's just inappropriate for them to be that distance. And have the dogs practice sitting on a dog bed. Same principle I just talked about for the for the front door. Older dog, we let kind of do what he wants to do, but maybe we have one of the younger dogs sitting over here by the fish tank, in between the fish tank and the work island. The other one's sitting over by the work island and like the bathroom. So the dogs are on different spaces, and we help them practice. So you do the same things. Sit, take a step backwards to the table, walk back, give them that treat. Eventually work your way back to sitting down at the table. And then sitting down at the table and waiting 1 second before you get up and go to your treat. Then 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Eventually you put plates on there with no food. And you're clanking your silverware on the plate. The dog hears that. Normally that causes them to come forward, but no, because we make the one sound and we stop what we're doing, we go over and give them a treat. And we're not doing this during dinner. We're creating practice scenarios and situations to teach the dog manners and teach it the behavior we want them to have. Teaching both dogs to do this is going to help both of them practice some self-restraint and self-control, practice respecting boundaries, practice not sweating you, practice listening to you. There's a whole lot of mini lessons here that are really important. Let me see, what else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we went over. The snuffle mats, get those snuffle mats. They really will make a big difference, and please switch over to feeding them twice a day. I think that's a contributing factor. I think especially dogs that don't have enough of a resource, that's when we're more likely to protect the little that we have. So if we don't want to leave food out all the time, that takes all the motivation out. But I'd like to see the guardians feeding them like at least twice a day, so that way the dogs are not hungry and less of a likely to want to guard. Now, if you have any questions or the stuff that we went over, I can only help you if you let me know. I have videos for all this stuff, and it's very normal for clients, as I mentioned to you a couple minutes ago, to need to make adjustments. Call me or text me. Do not email me. I got 150 emails a day. That's the slowest way to reach me. As a client, I want you to be able to skip to the front of the line. So I don't care if it's 2 minutes after I walk out this door or if it's 2 years from now. If you have a question with Nike or anything else, even if it's not something we went over, call me. I might have a video I can share with you, and you can do it yourself from home. Might have to set up a follow-up session, but let's try to do it the free way first. All right, Nike. Touch. Yes. This is my buddy Nike, and this is Mikey's roadmap to success. I said Mikey, but it's Nike. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it. Yes.